Hey guys, and welcome back to the channel. It's another preview and prediction video, this time for Roland Garros 2023 semi-final between Casper Ruud and Alexander Zverev. It'll be the second semi-final and the night match, and I cannot actually wait to get into this one because I think it's a really intriguing matchup. They've never played on clay before. The head-to-head is 2-1 in favor of Sasha Zverev, but the most recent meeting, which was last year, Casper Ruud came out on top. Before we get into it though, remember to hit that like button, do subscribe if you're new, and do leave a rating or review if you're listening on a podcast platform. Also, thank you to all our subscribers. You guys are legends. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do something pretty similar to what we normally do, which is go through the players' route to the semi-final, and then we will have a quick discussion about how they've played so far in the tournament, how they looked, on top of also touching upon their head-to-head. And then finally, I'll try and break it down strategically and tactically and break down how the match might play out, what to potentially look out for, and ultimately give you guys my prediction on how the match will end up resulting. Okay, let's get into it. So Casper Ruud and Alexander Zverev. Well, Casper Ruud, of course, last year made the final of Roland Garros, also the final of the US Open as well. But we know that clay is his preferred surface. For Sasha Zverev, he looked really good up until the semi-finals when he came up against Rafael Nadal and took him to 2 tiebreakers and had to retire injured after that horrific ankle injury. Obviously, that was the last time he played last year. Came back this year, didn't really look the same. Very middling season, you'd say, so far, but at Roland Garros, he's definitely picked up some pace and form, that's for sure. Let's get into Casper Ruud's route to the final then, because I think he's had harder opponents so far, in my opinion. So he played Eimer in the first round, straight set victory there. Zepieri and Zhang both took a set off him, but he came through in the end unscathed. And then Jarry, who he'd lost to in Geneva in the final, he managed to get revenge and beat him in the end. I thought that was an impressive victory, mainly because, as I said, Jarry beat him only about a week and a half ago, and beat him in not comprehensive fashion in a tight match, but still it was a good display. So Ruud put that to the back of his mind. He won some tight sets as well, 7-6, 7-6, 7-5. And I thought that was an impressive win. Holger Rune as well, an impressive one. He played him in the quarterfinals last year. Roland Garros won in 4 sets. This year, however, he played him in Rome in the semi-finals, lost him in 3 sets. And I thought maybe the same might occur. Now, part of that might have been down to, or parts of Rune's loss might have been down to the fact that he played 5 really long sets against Cerundolo in the previous round. He did look a bit gassed, but I do think Ruud also was clinical in his display and some real positive signs, no doubt. For Alexander Zverev, he's had a little bit of an easier route, I'd say, although started off in not the easiest fashion, playing Lloyd Harris in the first round, beat him in straight sets, Molcan as well. TFO, to be fair, he's not a particularly easy opponent on the clay. Beat him in 4 sets. Some really entertaining tennis on show there. Dimitrov didn't play his best, but the first set was impressive. Beat him in straight sets. And then Echeverry, the Argentine who's been in really good form on clay, took a set off him, but Zverev in the end managed to get it done in 4 sets. So how both players looked? Well, I've commentated on both players' matches actually to a degree. I think for Zverev, not much has changed in all honesty since he was playing at Roland Garros last year. I wouldn't say he's playing as good as he was this time last year. In all honesty, I think he's like, if we were to see the Zverev that played against Nadal last year, I think he wins. I think that level was actually very high. I'm not sure if he's at that level at the moment, in all honesty, because the level that he was playing in that match, his forehand just looks so clean. He was going line a lot as well, taking calculated risks against Nadal in that match, and he just looked very good. He'd beaten Alcaraz in the previous round, of course, in 4 sets, and in all honesty, I think he looked like potentially, if not beating Nadal, he was going to compete with Nadal anyway, and that's what he did up until the injury. For Casper Ruud, I think he's looked quite good, and he's looked similar to the form that he had last year at Roland Garros. He had a pretty easy route to the final, obviously lost to Rafa Nadal in straight sets. He's put that behind him, though, and I have a feeling that we're going to see a pretty similar level to what we saw against Holger Rune by Casper Ruud, which I think is a pretty high level, very solid level anyway, to say the least. So interested to see how Casper Ruud gets on as well. I'm intrigued to see how he handles Zverev's serve. and we'll touch upon that in more depth in a second. But yeah, I think for Ruud, he's progressively got better and better, which is obviously a positive for me. And he just looks like he's being able to dictate with the forehand. He looks at home on the red dirt. He really does. And I think Roland Garros, he knows it's the big time. He's soaking it in, and I think he's enjoying it. So, how might this match then play out? Well, let's first of all talk about a few things. And I think the first thing is the mental side, and that is where the head to head comes into it. So, as I said, 2-1 in favor of Zverev, although the most recent match was in Miami last year. You could argue Miami was actually the slowest of surfaces that they played on so far. They played in Miami, Paris, and Cincinnati. So, yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. Ruud won that. It was on a hard court, though, in 3 sets. And Zverev, some interesting matches at that time of the year, although that was before, not too long before the Roland Garros tournament. Now, the question is, can we take much from that Miami match? And my answer is probably not. I know it's a pretty slow surface, Miami, but Roland Garros is a lot slower. It's clay, the movement's different. I don't really take any, in my opinion anyway, I don't take anything from the head to head. It's only 2-1 anyway. They've never played on clay. So how does it then play out? So let's talk about the serve return dynamic first, because I think that's really important. Let's touch upon Zverev's serve. So I think Zverev, he has and still is having some issues with double faults. It's not happening as often as it has been in the past or prior years, but it is something that can rear its head, its ugly head at times. His first serve is going to be key. He needs to make his first serves, needs to hit his spots, no doubt, against Casper Ruud. And he's got one of the best first serves on tour when it's firing. He does. He's a top 10 first server, in my opinion. His overall serve might not be top 10 potentially, but his first serve definitely is, if not even maybe top 6 or 7, in all honesty. Maybe not top 5, but 6 or 7. Because that first serve, I mean, he generates so much pace. He's so tall. He gets so much kick off his serve because he's so tall, because of the surface as well, how slow it is, the amount of spin he puts on the ball. And it's very, very tough for players to really get into that first serve and win a whole lot of points on it. The biggest thing for me, though, with Zverev is he hitting his spots? Because I feel like sometimes he can be a little bit inaccurate with his spot serving. Although I think recently, as he's played more and more since his return from injury, he is doing it better. For sure, I think that's something that's really key because Casper Ruud, even though he's not the most natural returner, I think he's pretty decent. I think on clay, he's going to stand very far back against Zverev. He's going to try and give himself as much time as possible, even. His forehand return is definitely better than his backhand return. With his backhand return, Ruud, you might get some shorter balls, some mishits, some missed returns. With his forehand, for the most part, the quality on that forehand return is pretty decent. I imagine Sasha's going to try and hit the backhand hard and then vary it up by going into the forehand, potentially going out wide and maybe even coming to serve on volley, which I think is a good option against Casper Ruud, especially if he's serving well. Try and shorten the points. Don't get into long rallies with Casper Ruud. Don't let him utilize his forehand. So I think that's pretty key for Zverev, in my opinion, making a high percentage of first serves, at least 60%, if not 65% at a minimum. In terms of Casper Ruud's serve, well, there's a few things. So just like how Zverev is going to be targeting the Ruud backhand return, I think actually Ruud might target the forehand return of Zverev. That sounds weird to say, but Zverev is one of the few ATP players whose forehand return is actually weaker than his backhand return. His backhand return is actually very good and it's up there with the best, in my opinion. He hits with a lot of depth, barely any backswing needed. Timing is really, really good on that wing. And not only does he hit with great depth, but also with direction as well in a lot of instances. The forehand return, it's pretty average, in honesty. It really is. It can be very loopy with hardly any depth or pace through the court or penetration through the court. And it can be a bit of a gimme at times, in honesty. So I think the forehand return is actually something that Ruud's going to target. Players who have played against Zverev in this tournament have done that. I've seen it being done, and I don't blame them. I would do the same. I just think it's a clever tactic to utilize. Obviously, you have a bit of variation in there with the body serve, and then you would go into the backhand as well. But generally speaking, I think the forehand return, people would be silly not to try and take advantage of that. For Casper Ruud with his serve, there's a few things. I think he needs to hit his spots. Zverev's a pretty good returner naturally, generally speaking. And I think Ruud needs to make sure that he's hitting a lot of first serves. His second serve, I don't think it's going to be super effective against Zverev. In honesty, I think so. If I was Zverev, I would be trying to step in on the second serve, and he's a tall guy. Try and get on top of the bounce and try and get on the front foot straight away on that second serve because I feel like that's really crucial for him. Similarly, with Zverev's second serve, Ruud will stay very far back, but if he hits with good quality on that second serve return, it gets him to neutral straight away. So some interesting points to bear in mind there. I think for Ruud, the serve +1 is extremely important, making sure that next ball is a forehand. Not only is it a forehand, but it's a forehand that he can dictate proceedings with and potentially get on the front foot with and be offensive. So crucial for both players. There's certain different aspects that are important with the serve and return dynamic, but something to bear in mind. With the exchanges from the back of the court, I'm not quite sure that Zverev wants to stay in longer rallies with Casper Ruud. If I'm being honest with you, I think Casper Ruud's consistency on the clay is actually very good. He tends to hit really good running balls, and I've seen comparisons with David Ferreira. I think David Ferreira was almost a wall, almost never missed. But I think with Casper Ruud, he's got maybe less shot tolerance than David Ferrer, but I think he's got higher quality forehand. The forehand on this clay, the way he hits it is perfect for this surface. The amount of topspin, the amount of coverage, the shape, it's just made for clay. It really is. And I think he needs to utilize that as much as possible, that forehand. And I think if I was him, I'd be going hard and deep into corners, but actually potentially going into the forehand and attacking that side even more than the backhand because the backhand is very, very solid. If he wants to go into out the forehand into the backhand of Zverev, he may not get hurt, but he'll definitely find anyway when the ball coming back is a high quality ball. Defensively, Zverev on the backhand side, his quality of ball is very, very good. On the forehand side, not quite as much, but even then, defensively, I think he's very good. He's got good wingspan, and he utilizes his tools perfectly. I think for on top of that, for Casper, I think he needs to potentially go into wing quite a bit, and then try and exploit that forehand. I think that's really the key for Casper Ruud. And coming forward is an interesting one. I can't see him coming forward a lot against Zverev, but if the opportunity arises, I don't see why not. He's got a pretty good net game as well, Casper Ruud, and I feel like he is going to have a lot of points where he's potentially bossing the forehand to forehand. But the question is, can he protect his backhand enough on this surface? Because Zverev and his backhand is very, very solid. And most likely he's going to try and go backhand to backhand and find those angles first. That's when it then will become awkward for Ruud's backhand, in my opinion. So a few things to bear in mind there for sure. I think the other thing is, Casper Ruud, he does hit a heavy ball, and they're going to be playing in the evening, so most likely it won't have as much of an effect, you would imagine. So that could be an advantage to Alexander Zverev. But we'll see how it goes. I think backhand to backhand is no contest. It's Zverev. Forehand to forehand, I think Ruud takes the edge. But really, we're talking about the ad court, and the ad court, I actually think Zverev will come out on top in the ad court exchanges. I think he's very good, as I said, at defending that side, and also, just being very, very good when it comes to changing direction on the backhand side. On the forehand side, there's definitely some issues that still need to be ironed out, but he'll get there. He'll get there for sure. He will. What else to discuss? I think we've covered quite a lot of it, to be fair. Drop shot, I can't see, but either using it that often, in honesty. Yeah, I think that's it. To be honest with you, that's it from my side. In terms of prediction, I think Ruud could actually win. At first, I thought Zverev would win, but I'm now leaning towards more Casper Ruud. I think it's going to be more solid. I'm going to Casper Ruud in 4 sets. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you very much, guys. Stay safe and well. We'll see you in the next video.